Exposed, incredibly touching moment at family CEO meeting transforms relationships in 30 seconds. Sarah Thompson stood at the boardroom door, her heart racing and palms slick with sweat. Today was pivotal, not just for Thompson Co., but for her, a 32-year-old single mother thrust into her father's shoes. Anxiety gnawed at her, the whispers of "the daughter" from the seasoned CEOs echoing in her mind. Could she rise from the shadows of her father's legacy, or would the contemptuous undercurrents of the meeting drown her before she even began? As soon as she entered, the atmosphere thickened with tension, voices clashing like thunder. Men in sharp suits traded barbs on strategies, while Sarah sat at the expansive table, feeling further from the heart of the discussion than ever. With every raised voice, every dismissive glance directed her way, she felt a deepening sense of isolation. The generational divide, a chasm she desperately wanted to bridge, was starkly illuminated. Beneath the suits, she sensed the biases directed toward her, doubts multiplying as rapidly as her self-questioning, leaving her teetering between determination and despair. Just moments before a heated disagreement escalated, she scanned the room, eyes settling on the weathered briefcase her father had left behind. It lay like a ghost of him, a haunting reminder of the dreams he had for this company, and for her. In a moment of intense desperation, she reached for it, her fingers trembling as she unlatched it. Inside, nestled among papers, was an envelope, unassuming yet filled with her father's cherished wisdom. Before she could think, she tore it open. Her breath hitched, fresh ink blotted with age, and suddenly it felt as though her father was there, guiding her. As she read his words on perseverance, loyalty, the importance of roots, the emotions swelled within her, a bittersweet tide of love and fear. Could she speak his truth to this room that seemed to loom over her like a giant? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can, leave a like. It really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stood, clutching the paper, her heart thundering against her chest. For what felt like an eternity, silence enveloped the room. All eyes turned towards her. With newfound intent, she began to speak, her father's words flowing through her like a lifeline. She recounted anecdotes of the business's humble beginnings, weaving in lessons that echoed through the years, offering not just facts but shared history. The reaction was palpable. The board members, silently skeptical, suddenly found themselves confronting their biases. Each blink and nod, every furrowed brow, began to reveal a flicker of contemplation. In that moment, a connection sparked between her and them, between past legacies and future possibilities. Yet doubt clawed at her insides, the tension prickling in the air. Would they allow her to lead, or was this only a fleeting moment? As the silence stretched, Sarah felt time hanging, heavy with anticipation. The clock ticked, and she understood then this was a mere prelude to a greater battle. Could she uphold her father's legacy against the tide of doubt that still lurked, ready to unearth itself from the shadows? The stakes had never felt higher, and resignation was not an option. No, this was just the beginning of an uphill climb. Sarah had harnessed her father's wisdom, but the battle was just beginning. As she reclaimed the authority of the room, she could feel the energy shift, even if it remained unspoken. The skeptical gazes had softened, if only slightly, but beneath the surface, the real challenge loomed. With history on her side, yet plagued by an uncertain future, Sarah pressed forward. "Thank you, Sarah," Greg, the senior vice president, finally said, his voice laced with an edge of newfound respect. It's a compelling history indeed. However, nostalgia can only carry a company so far. What are your plans for the future? The question hung thick in the air, a challenge, an opportunity cloaked in doubt, not a simple inquiry, but an unmasking. She felt a wave of insecurity, a reminder of her own inexperience. Could her father's legacy survive her ambitions, or would it falter against her own naive optimism? With an inward breath, Sarah felt the pulse of clarity drifting through her. "I appreciate the history, Greg," she replied, her voice steadying. "But my father's lessons also taught us adaptability. I believe we should evolve, integrate new technologies, diversify our offerings. I've been researching emerging markets, and I see significant potential there." A ripple of conversation stirred as she spoke. Some nodded, weighing her suggestions. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was a tentative spark, yet the hesitation was palpable. Sarah could sense the lingering skepticism of the older generation. They were still wrestling with the daughter label, the uncertainty of her resolve. "You mean to say we should abandon our core strengths?" Richard, the finance director, interjected, the challenge blatant in his tone. "Those markets are untested. It's risky. We've always played it safe." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. His words struck a nerve. Playing it safe had left their competitors wide open to seize opportunities, and she couldn't let fear dictate this meeting. "Perhaps there's a risk in stagnation, too," she countered, meeting Richard's gaze directly. "Staying stagnant could mean losing everything we have in the face of change."
Her words echoed knowingly, mirroring the very essence of what it felt like to be caught between two worlds. The air thickened with fervor as discussions spiraled into a back and forth between tradition and change. Every person in the room was weighing their comfort and predicting outcomes. Behind every sharp tongue, Sarah caught glimpses of fear of failure, fear of her leading the company into uncharted territory. She had to confront these doubts more directly. "I invite you all to think back on how this organization grew beyond your father's vision. Even Von Durer didn't start with a paintbrush." Murmurs ignited. She sensed the tide might turn, but Richard's glare bore a challenge too glaring to ignore. "And what makes you think you know better than those who've navigated these waters for years? We're talking about a legacy." The stakes returned to the forefront. She wasn't just a proxy anymore. This room was her battleground. "I'm not denying the legacy," she shot back, her tone firm but measured. "But I'm also not letting it become a shackle. We stand on his shoulders, and that alone necessitates future thinking. If I'm to be the leader, I'll need your support. Together, we can forge a path that honors our past while embracing what's new. I'm willing to fail if it means trying." As her impassioned words settled over the group, an odd silence resumed, vulnerability laced beneath their collective bravado. A shift occurred. Something in the air felt charged, pregnant with possibility. Sarah realized she was pushing narratives forward. She could turn doubt into dialogue, fear into cooperation. But the session wasn't over. Would they rally behind her vision, or would another challenger arise, ready to dismantle her legitimacy? Anxiety churned in her gut, forcing her focus from their faces to the horizon ahead. The battle for acceptance had begun, but with whom would she stand when it mattered most? As the meeting progressed, tension wound tighter. A deep-rooted battle for identity loomed larger than just business decisions. Sarah knew she had to prepare for the inevitable question that remained unasked between the lines. Could she truly be the leader they had long resisted, or would she become another casualty of the legacy that loomed over her? As discussions continued to swirl, Sarah felt more than just the weight of the room pressing down on her. She sensed a turning tide. Uncertainty hung in the air, thick and almost oppressive, yet beneath it, something akin to potential shimmered. While she remained surrounded by experienced professionals with decades behind them, her resolution crystallized further. She understood that she was not merely defending a legacy, she was crafting a new narrative. The meeting dragged on, punctuated by heated exchanges and whispered critiques. Richard remained steadfast, his brows furrowed in disapproval. She could see in his eyes a mix of doubt and a pain reminiscent of her own struggles.
Perhaps he feared she might betray the foundation on which they had all built their careers. But what he didn't know was that her ambition didn't drive her to erase the past. It urged her to build on it. With every response she crafted in her mind, Sarah waged a battle far deeper than a mere professional discourse. Each statement felt like a vital piece in a game of chess, where every move could either solidify her standing or topple her into irrelevance. "We don't have to abandon our core," she offered, her voice calm, "but we can refine it. Innovating doesn't mean discarding, it's an evolution, one that can sustain our legacy." The faces in the room writhed with skepticism, yet Sarah could almost see glimmers of realization sparking behind their guarded expressions. Maybe they were starting to understand. In defending her vision, Sarah wasn't just advocating a forward-thinking approach, she was inviting them to be part of a journey. But could she reach them on a deeper level? A flicker of inspiration surged in her mind. The connection she needed was not merely about strategy, it required vulnerability. Today we have the opportunity to embrace change together. My father may have laid the foundation, but those walls can't contain us forever. We can honor his legacy and redefine success for the next generation. As the words flowed out, Sarah looked for a receptive face, a hint of understanding amidst the resistance. Her sister's longtime colleague, Linda, sat quietly at the edge of the table. She had always been supportive, and Sarah felt a kindred spirit within her. "Linda, you often speak of how technology has shifted customer expectations. Would you share your insights?" This wasn't purely altruistic. Sarah wanted to bolster her argument with shared authority. As Linda nodded and began outlining her thoughts, Sarah basked in the warmth of camaraderie filling the room. The immediacy of their shared experiences began dismantling the barriers. Richard, hands steepled in thought, began to soften, and for the first time Sarah saw him consider what she had proposed. Yet doubt lingered in his eyes. What would it take for him to see her as a partner rather than a competitor? As the meeting progressed, Sarah realized she needed to cement her presence in a way that cut through to Richard's core. "You're right to question my assertions, Richard. Your fears mirror many others in this room. All I ask is that together we confront those fears rather than let them divide us." The palpable tension thawed slightly, but uncertainty still loomed. Sarah understood that the stakes only intensified as the day went on. She could feel the nimbleness of her thoughts transforming into a decisive action plan, one that would address both the fear of change and faith in legacy. But Richard's doubt looped in her mind. How could she validate her vision without daunting challenges arising from within? Just then, she recalled a pivotal lesson from her father's teachings. True leadership means acknowledging your vulnerabilities. "I'm not perfect. I'll make mistakes," she said, heart racing at the exposure of her own uncertainties. "But I promise to listen and adapt. All I ask is for the same from you." While murmurs rippled through the room, something more profound shifted, a recognition perhaps of their shared vulnerabilities. It was a risk, and Sarah bore the weight of what lay ahead, but felt empowered by the solidarity they might forge. Yet, as she bravely laid her heart on the table, an unexpected voice interrupted. "What if your vision fails, Sarah? What then?" Eyes turned to her, awaiting her response. Grappling with the gravity of the question and its implications, Sarah steadied herself as a new challenge presented itself. How far was she willing to go to defend her path? Would her willingness to risk failure inspire trust, or would it expose her to the very downfall she sought to escape? The room went silent, the air palpable with anticipation as Sarah processed the challenge, her heart racing at the prospect of confrontation. Richard's question loomed like an impending storm, a direct hit that left little room for evasion. She could feel the weight of her colleague's eyes boring into her, a mixture of skepticism and hope swirling between them. What if her vision did fail? The thought struck deeper than a mere hypothetical. It was a brutal wrestle against her insecurities, those little nagging whispers that insisted she wasn't enough, a shadow that had loomed throughout her career. But this meeting marked a decisive moment, a fork in the road that could either cement her place as a leader or seal her fate as merely a caretaker of the past. "I've thought about that a lot." Her voice held a steady calm, belying the turmoil within. "Failure is a part of innovation." She glanced around, meeting Richard's gaze, and the room's tension shifted. If we define ourselves by fear of failure, we'll remain stagnant. So yes, what if my vision fails? It would hurt. It would hurt deeply. But more than that, I hope to learn and grow from it. Isn't that what we want for this organization? Richard shifted slightly in his chair, but the determination in Sarah's voice sparked a flicker of understanding, a crack in the armor he had so tightly donned. As colleagues began to nod, Sarah pressed on, her thoughts spilling forth with newfound clarity. "Imagine what we could accomplish if we reframed failure as a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. We could become innovators rather than merely observers. Those who dare to challenge the norm are often the ones who create the biggest impact, aren't they?" With each word, Sarah could feel the heat of her conviction radiate within her. Yet, despite the stirring reactions in the room, a part of her still battled doubt. Could she boldly advocate for a paradigm shift while managing the responsibility of their heritage? As the silence enveloped the table, everyone anticipated the next move. She needed a strategy, a tangible path towards this change that didn't just rely on abstract ideals. As she composed herself, she recalled another lesson from her father. Transformation requires a concrete plan, not just passion. "Let's consider a pilot project," she proposed. "Something manageable where we can test new ideas and methods. We don't have to completely overhaul what has worked. Instead, we can dip our toes in change. If it flops, we're in a safe space to learn." The suggestion took root. Embraced, the vision felt less daunting, more like an exploration rather than contention. Richard leaned forward, the crease in his brow beginning to soften. How would that look? Her heart soared slightly. A dialogue was opening, a true exchange rather than a confrontation. Sarah paused to visualize the outcome before answering. "We could leverage technology, analyze customer feedback more rapidly, and adapt our operations accordingly. It would show our clients that we're committed to evolving their needs alongside our business." The stakes were high, yet with every word, Sarah realized she was not simply defending her vision, she was inviting her colleagues to reshuffle the cards of their collective professional game. The possibility of a shared success brewed in the room. But as excitement rippled around the table, Sarah's mind remained restless. While she had chipped away at the doubts in Richard's eyes, deeper uncertainty lingered within her. What if the pilot project failed despite her efforts? What if it further eroded her reputation, solidifying the fears of doubters instead of dispelling them? Caught in this turbulent sea of introspection, Sarah knew she needed to navigate these waters delicately. She may have opened the door to collaboration, but she would also need to prepare for the storms that awaited on her path forward. The meeting adjourned with a cautious optimism, yet as Sarah left the room, courage mingled with trepidation. She had ignited a spark of potential, but would it be enough to sustain the flame? Would Richard and the others truly stand by her through the uncertainty ahead, or would they retreat to the safety of the past? These thoughts clouded her focus as she considered her next steps, feeling the weight swell once more in her chest. The real challenge was yet to come. Transforming camaraderie into collective vision would require more than persuasion. It would demand her unwavering resolve to face the unknown. As she walked down the corridor, her mind raced. She needed a plan that could bridge the gap between hope and action, something tangible that would keep the momentum alive. But more importantly, she had to confront the deeper shadows lurking inside of her. Was she truly ready to shoulder the weight of change? Just then, her phone buzzed.
An unexpected message flashed across the screen. "Let's meet. I think it's time we had a serious discussion." It was from Richard. Was this the moment she feared, or an opportunity she had longed for? Sarah paused in her tracks, an almost electric pulse coursing through her veins at the sight of Richard's message. This was no casual dinner invitation. It was a summons. As anxiety clutched at her throat, she grappled with the weight of uncertainty crashing over her like an invisible tide. What could Richard possibly want to discuss? In the span of a heartbeat, she was forced to confront the raw possibility that this meeting might not only redefine her project, but could also illuminate her personal demons. The shadows of self-doubt that had stalked her since childhood hovered ominously, whispering insidious reminders of her past failures, the moments she had faltered under pressure. Taking a deep breath, she decided to meet him. If she was to conquer her fears, she needed to face them head-on. Arriving at the cafe where they agreed to meet, Sarah found herself unexpectedly shaken by the casual environment, a far cry from the sterile conference room. It buzzed with laughter and chatter. But as she entered, her eyes immediately found Richard seated at a corner table. He looked somewhat apprehensive, the usual bravado tempered by the seriousness of the situation. "Hey, Sarah." His greeting was subdued, a contrast to their earlier exchange that had crackled with energy. "Hi, Richard. Thanks for meeting with me." She took a seat, feeling the weight of his scrutiny. After a moment of silence, he glanced around as if gauging the mood of the cafe before speaking. "I wanted to talk more about what you proposed in the meeting." The anticipation hung thick in the air, and Sarah could hardly maintain her composure. "Yes? What are your thoughts?" Richard leaned in, his eyes searching hers. "I think you're on to something with the pilot project, but I need to be honest with you. There are several members of the board who are resistant to change. They see our current methods as safe, and implementing something new could be risky." The knot in her stomach tightened at his words. Risk. The very notion that sent a shiver down her spine was being placed directly at her feet again. But this was the moment she had yearned for, the chance to convince him that fear need not dictate their path. "Richard, change always bears risk, but remaining stagnant carries its own dangers, doesn't it? If we don't adapt, we'll become irrelevant." Her voice rang with a blend of passion and desperation, a plea for clarity amid the storm of her anxieties. He nodded, but uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. "I understand that, but you also have to consider the implications for your reputation. If this project doesn't yield results, that burden falls on you." She felt the sting of his words, each one like a pin pricking through her fortress of resolve. But beneath the doubt, a flicker of realization ignited. She had endured too much to allow discomfort to dictate her fate. "I'm aware of the stakes, Richard. The only way we'll know if our approach is effective is to try. Inaction is a choice, too, and it's one we cannot afford to make." "Okay, but let's talk strategy. You'll need to have a solid plan that addresses the board's concerns and outlines clear benchmarks for success. Can you do that?" His tone shifted slightly, hinting at an unexpected spark of support intertwined with skepticism. "Yes, I can, but I'll need your backing during this process." She locked her gaze onto him, the gravity of her request hanging in the air like a promise. Richard hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly, albeit reluctantly. "If you present a comprehensive plan, I'll help you, but it won't be easy."
In that moment, a surge of hope coursed through her. Sarah felt invigorated at the prospect of not only having an ally, but also the chance to reshape her destiny through action and investment. She wouldn't let fear dictate her narrative. Progress could start with a single decision. Leaving the cafe, however, doubt still clawed at the edges of her confidence. Would her plan resonate beyond the walls of Richard's support? Would she find the fortitude to push through the inevitable resistance? As she stepped outside, her gaze fell on a nearby park where children played, laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, an innocent confidence radiating from each joyous shout. In that moment, amid the chaos of her internal battle, Sarah understood a truth she'd rarely acknowledged. If she wanted to lead her team through the unknown, it wasn't just about crafting a compelling proposal, it was also about reclaiming her own narrative and unearthing the depth of courage within herself. While she had gained ground that day, a fresh wave of apprehension washed over her. The battle ahead would require more than strategy. It would demand her very essence, tempered by experience and stitched with resilience. As she prepared to take on the next stage of her journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that the thrill of the unknown awaited her. The moment of truth in her professional narrative was drawing near, but would she rise to meet it or falter under pressure? A new message pinged in her pocket, this time from an unknown number. "We've noticed your recent proposal efforts. Let's talk." With her heart racing, she recognized the familiar tone of impending conflict. Was this the next vital conversation, or something more detrimental? The moment Sarah glanced at the unknown message, her heart quickened with a cocktail of dread and eagerness. The ambiguity gnawed at her. She felt the familiar creeping sensation of vulnerability slip through her defenses. Yet, beneath that anxiety, there was a current of determination. This could be the push she needed to break free from the chains of doubt that had haunted her for too long. Instead of retreating into her usual cocoon of uncertainty, she stepped forward, embracing the uncertainty. This was a pivotal moment, one that had the potential to reshape not just her professional trajectory, but her self-perception as well. As she walked towards her office, she mulled over possible ramifications of engaging with this unknown contact. Who were they, and what did they want? Her footing became more confident with each step as thoughts of her proposal filled her mind. Richard's support reverberated in her heart. She was no longer on uncertain ground. She had planted her flag. The realization that she had control over her situations empowered her further. If this unknown entity wanted to discuss her proposal, they had seen potential in her work. Once in her office, she opened her laptop, the familiar screen flooding her with purpose. Pulling up the framework of her proposal, she started refining her vision. She had to anticipate objections, outline counter-arguments, and create feasible timelines. It was not merely about securing support, but establishing herself as a leader who could navigate through challenges. As she was drafting bullet points, her mind raced with the fears of her past failures. That voice of doubt curled in the corners of her consciousness, ominously asking whether she was merely reaching for something unattainable. Fighting against it took effort, but she reminded herself of the children in the park, unrestrained in their laughter, uninhibited by future consequences. Within moments, the once daunting task of developing a comprehensive plan became a liberation exercise. Each bullet point she crafted became a stepping stone. She articulated her aspirations, pushing back against ingrained fears. The contours of her ambitions sharpened, like a sculptor transforming a block of stone into art. But then, just as clarity began to take hold, a wave of anxiety rushed back as she recalled Richard's warning. Her reputation was on the line. The notion of vulnerability was cemented within corporate walls, and opening herself to external criticism felt like baring her soul for all to see. Could she truly endure that judgment? As she wrestled with her thoughts, another ping jolted her from introspection. This time, the familiar notification was her calendar alert. Transformational meetings were lined up for the week. It was time for her to prepare not just for the board, but for everyone scrutinizing her every move. They would either see her potential or her inadequacy. Unsure of her ability to withstand such pressures, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection. She remembered her mother's voice from years ago, encouraging her to reach for her dreams despite being told she was too bold. That memory reignited her resolve. She would engage in these conversations, yes, but bravely. As the sun began to set, casting an orange hue across her office, Sarah felt a stirring awareness of her own strength.
The notion of fear shifted from a shackle to a companion, one she had the power to confront, even in its most persistent forms. Finally, she reached for her phone, ready to respond to the unknown message. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a heartbeat before she typed, "I'd be more than happy to talk. I want to learn more about your interest in my proposal." With a final breath, she hit send. Almost instantaneously, she felt the weight of her decision. It was a commitment, one that rattled her, but also electrified her spirit. Then, without warning, the phone buzzed again, and her heart raced anew. The reply hinted at a complexity she hadn't anticipated. "Great. Meet me at the office. We need to discuss the implications of your proposal, and it won't be pleasant." The thrill of the unknown twisted in her stomach, and Sarah sat back in her chair, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Could she handle the pressure yet again? The looming challenge was bigger than she had envisaged, shrouded in the thrill of potential failure. It was a critical juncture, and there was no turning back. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Sarah stepped into the conference room, the sterile atmosphere wrapping around her like an unwelcome embrace. The air was thick with expectancy, a barely contained energy that buzzed around the long oval table populated by her colleagues. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as she recalled the message, still fresh, still daunting. The unknown figure waiting to engage held power over her next steps, and she was acutely aware of that responsibility. She took a moment to reorganize her thoughts, mentally reviewing the preparation she had put into the proposal. This wasn't merely a presentation, it was an assertion of her value and vision, a chance to redefine how her peers perceived her. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, grounding herself in determination. Whatever the conversation entailed, it had to be approached with unflinching honesty. Then, as she glanced at the clock, anxiety bubbled within her. Timeliness was imperative in a world that dissected seconds. She couldn't afford any delays that might undermine her credibility. She would take this challenge head on. "Sarah," a voice called, breaking the momentary silence that had enveloped her. She turned, meeting the penetrating gaze of Jason, her manager, who had gathered the team for this discussion. There was a glimmer of something in his eyes, perhaps curiosity or apprehension, that only deepened her resolve. "Ready?" he asked, and she nodded, swallowing hard. As she made her way to the front of the room, the familiar script of self-doubt threatened to derail her. What if they viewed her proposal as a folly? But this was no time for hesitation. She had worked tirelessly for months, pouring her energy into crafting a vision that could truly transform their processes. Taking a deep breath, she began.
The clarity of her intentions sharpened her voice, each word emerging with an unexpected power. As she presented her proposal, she noticed subtle nods of approval from her colleagues, igniting a glimmer of hope. Their engagement fed her confidence. She saw potential for change printed in their expressions. These were the very moments she had envisioned, the moments where she could translate her fears into bold action. Yet, as she reached the critical point of her plan, Jason interjected, his furrowed brow drawing her attention.
It's ambitious, Sarah, but have you considered the backlash if we fail? The ramifications of what this might mean for the entire team? His words felt heavy, like a stone dropped into still waters, and ripples of doubt spread through her. She could sense the collective breath of her colleagues, their tension palpable. Sarah's heart raced. Did he believe in her? Did any of them? The pressure bore down on her, but she refused to crumble. "Absolutely, I have considered the risks," she responded, her voice steady. "But the potential benefits far outweigh the apprehension. We can't let fear of failure dictate our choices. Instead, we should embrace the chance for growth." The words were alive, echoing not just in the room but also within her. This was a reflection of her own journey to acceptance, one that had twisted through her every interaction, her self-image wrestling with every past mistake. "Those who only dwell on their fears risk stagnation," she continued, her voice rising slightly with passion. "We have a responsibility to push boundaries, to innovate." As she spoke, she caught Richard's eye, who also sat at the table. She could see his encouragement, his faith in her ability to stand strong against scrutiny. They weren't just seeking approval, they were creating something new together. The dialogue shifted after her defiant statement. Questions sprang forth, inquiries that were deeper, more insightful, and for the first time she felt as though they were truly engaging with her vision. With every response, a flicker of confidence bloomed within her. They were not merely evaluating a proposal, they were joining her on a collaborative journey. But as she reveled in this newfound momentum, Jason leaned forward once more, his demeanor shifting to that of a mentor. "I appreciate your passion, Sarah, but remember, clarity requires transparency. What do you seek for support from us?" The weight of her ambition collided with the stark reality of corporate machinery. Now came a pivotal moment, the balance between vulnerability and integrity. How much of her true self could she reveal without relinquishing control? She could feel the fragility of trust weaving through the room like a fine thread. An immediate choice lay before her. Would she bear her ambitions even farther, or skirt the edges to maintain the comfort of safety? As Sarah scanned the room, the silence hung heavy. Everyone was waiting for her next move.
The moment demanded authenticity, and inside her, a storm brewed. With conviction coursing through her veins, she decided this would be her moment to connect. As she opened her mouth to speak, the weight of her decision felt monumental. The emotional stakes were rising, and as she began to respond, she sensed this wasn't merely a presentation, it had transformed into the beginning of something deeply personal. But just as she was about to culminate her words of clarity, the door swung open, revealing another unexpected figure, a somber presence that could change the entire day's outcome. Was it a friend or a foe? Sarah's heart raced anew as she braced for whatever chaos this new twist might unleash. The door clicked shut behind the new arrival, a man whose face was familiar yet unfamiliar in the context of the conference room. Nathan, the company's chief financial officer, had always been a shadowy figure at the edge of their corporate discussions. His presence instantly shifted the atmosphere. Nervous energy morphed into a whirlwind of speculation. For a moment, Sarah's thoughts stumbled. Was he here to support her innovation or to derail it with fiscal caution? Just the sight of him sent ripples of doubt into her burgeoning confidence. She had always associated Nathan with meticulous budgets and stringent reviews, each decision shrouded in a realm she struggled to penetrate. "Nathan," he said, his voice even but edged with gravity, "I need to address some concerns regarding the financial forecasts in your proposal." A sharp breath caught in her throat. She had expected challenges, but not so explicitly from Nathan. The predictability of her fears was one thing, facing them head-on was another. Her pulse quickened as she felt every gaze in the room shift toward her, their collective focus pressing down like the weight of an anvil.
Taking a steadying breath, she crossed her arms, subconsciously shifting her energy from vulnerable to defiant. Of course, I anticipated questions on that front. What specific concerns do you have? Nathan stepped forward, crossing the distance with a purposeful stride. His features were tight, and even for a seasoned executive, it was clear this wasn't just about numbers for him. It was personal. The risks, he stated bluntly, they multiply when assuming we can adjust our margins on such a bold strategy. Investors won't take kindly to drastic shifts without comprehensive evidence. I have to consider not only the proposal, but also the repercussions it could have on the entire structure of our operations. Her instinct was to retreat into defensiveness, to lash out in frustration at his narrow focus. Yet she recognized the double-edged nature of his words. Maybe this wasn't just resistance, it was fear. Fear of what radical innovation could mean for them as a team, and more profoundly, for their collective destinies within the company. Internal reflections swirled.
How could she turn this moment of confrontation into a chance for clarity, not only for herself, but for all of them? "Nathan, I understand your concerns," she replied, her voice steady and resolute. "But what if this opportunity means the difference between remaining stagnant and moving forward together? Growth rarely comes without risk, and what we risk is far outweighed by what we stand to gain." The room fell completely silent, her colleagues hanging on her words. Their trust was palpable, and it ignited a newfound fire within her. But Nathan remained unmoved. "With respect, Sarah, innovation must be taken within the framework of strategy. You're presenting a vision, but at what cost?" She could almost feel her control slipping, the adrenaline of her earlier confidence faltering under the weight of doubt. But then she remembered. This was her proposal, born of her vision. This was her moment. "Then let's strategize together," she proposed firmly, her heart pounding. "Help me outline a pragmatic plan that satisfies both innovation and fiscal responsibility. This doesn't have to be an antagonistic exchange. I need your expertise just as much as I need the team's belief in the vision." The conviction of her words washed over her, fierce and uplifting, resonating through her colleagues as they leaned in, caught in the current of collaboration. As they began to re-engage, Sarah sensed the threads of trust weaving tighter. The conversation evolved from stony skepticism to open dialogue, a partnership in the very definition of the work she had proposed. However, just as the dialogue seemed to harmonize, Jason's phone buzzed with an urgent notification, instantly breaking the cadence of the moment. "I need to take this," he said, his expression tensing once more. "It's a priority." The abrupt shift in focus was unnerving. Who was on the other line, and what new challenge awaited? As Sarah's heart raced again, she couldn't shake the feeling that the potential collaboration she had begun might be overshadowed by unfolding chaos. Could the unity that had coalesced in this room withstand yet another shockwave? This pivotal moment hinged on how they would navigate the next hurdle. The stakes were rising yet again, and with them, so was her resolve to push through and prove her worth. Would this be just another disruption, or a catalyst for change? She braced herself again, ready to face whatever was about to unfold. The atmosphere in the room thickened with uncertainty as Jason stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind him. Sarah's gaze returned to Nathan, who was still eyeing her with that careful scrutiny reserved for major decisions, the breathing of her colleagues around her synchronizing into a quiet anticipation. "Sarah, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, we cannot afford to overlook the financial implications. This isn't just about today, it's about the long-term sustainability of the company."
His words hung in the air, and Sarah felt the weight of their reality reasserting itself. The numbers, the spreadsheets, the projections, they were all mountains she had yet to climb. Yet she had ventured too far into her vision to let fear reclaim the narrative. "What if we approach it differently?" she stated, trying to project calm, even enthusiasm. "Instead of viewing innovation and financials as enemies, why can't we see them as partners? I propose a phased approach that allows for adjustments based on measurable results. Nathan's brow furrowed, a flicker of interest replacing that initial skepticism. The jigsaw of this partnership might be more complex than she expected, but she was ready to draw deeper connections. The atmosphere subtly shifted, filled with a blend of cautious hope and latent tension. As discussions morphed organically, Sarah saw pieces of her proposal coming together, the team nodding, exchanging thoughts, and building from her framework. This sparked something in her, a burgeoning confidence that thrummed against the anxiety. "Let's outline key milestones," she suggested, more assertively, as she sketched ideas on the whiteboard. "By measuring progress at each stage, we can manage risk and gauge investor interest. It's transparency, and we can return to the budget adjustments with documented success stories." 50 minutes in, the room filled with murmurs of agreement, ideas bouncing between colleagues like sparks igniting a fire. Suddenly, Sarah felt a rush of pride wash over her as she commanded newfound respect. She had transcended her previous doubts, claiming this moment, molding it into a collaborative vision that galvanized her colleagues rather than pitting them against the financial realities. Then Jason swung back into the room, his expression tight, and Sarah's heartbeat quickened again. "We have a significant issue," he started, his voice low but urgent. "The investors are reconsidering their commitment, and they're looking for answers before the final vote next week." A cold wave of fear slipped through the gathered energy, and Sarah felt her temporary triumph wobble. "We've just begun to build momentum," she remarked, her breath quickening. "If this plan isn't viable, it can all come crashing down. We need to act quickly to salvage the communication and present our best case." Nathan's gaze sharpened, the tension between the trio palpable as they assessed the implications of Jason's news. "Okay, let's put our heads together," Sarah suggested, her heart racing, not from fear, but from the urgency of the challenge. "We can win them over by demonstrating how our innovation can align with long-term fiscal health. If we work quickly, we can counteract their doubts." With uncertainty bleeding into a sense of purpose, they gathered, channeling their anxiety into strategic planning. Sarah felt her instincts kick into high gear, flipping her fear into a challenge. This was more than a proposal now, it was potentially a lifeline. As they sketched notes, energized discussions propelled her once again into the spotlight of leadership as she bridged gaps between innovation and fiscal prudence. But as they honed their strategy, one unsettling thought hung in the air. Would they have enough time? Would they be able to convince the investors of the viability of their vision? Each tick of the clock seemed louder as pressure mounted, and for Sarah, it became clear that this moment could redefine her career. Success was within reach, but so were the potential pitfalls that lay hidden in the shadows of the financial abyss. As they wrapped up their strategy session, one question loomed large. Could she maintain her newfound strength while leading them through the impending storm? Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing toward the next steps. The moment of truth was about to arrive. The following week found Sarah standing before the investors, her heart a steady drumbeat against the backdrop of hushed anticipation. Each face in the conference room mirrored a different shade of skepticism and guarded hope, creating a palpable tension that hung between her and the board members. This presentation represented far more than financial concerns. It embodied her transformation, a journey that had rekindled her commitment to both her father's legacy and her own vision for the future of Thompson Co. Weeks had passed since that pivotal meeting where she first laid out her plan, and Sarah had diligently refined her proposal, infusing it with both her father's guiding principles and innovative strategies that showcased her leadership potential. As she glanced at her assembled colleagues, she felt the warmth of their shared purpose. This was a collaborative venture now, a tapestry woven from each person's contributions. No longer a solitary fight against an unknown, Sarah was stepping forward with an army of support at her back.
"Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice unwavering. "We stand at a crossroads, one that could define not just our company, but also the industry's approach to innovation and sustainability." She paused, meeting each gaze, drawing them in before laying the groundwork of her presentation. Today, we will outline a phased pilot project designed not only to mitigate risk, but to foster an environment that thrives on adaptability. Her confidence surged as she detailed the milestones. The plan detailed specific benchmarks tied to financial projections and timelines, illustrating their potential growth without sacrificing their established strengths. The investors shifted in their seats, ears pricked with interest. Sarah sensed an awakening, a growing realization that they were not merely gaining assurance about numbers, but embracing a vision that could resonate throughout the organization.
"In this pilot, we will closely monitor our progress," Sarah continued, addressing concerns that had once clouded her mind, but now felt like the stepping stones of her strategy. By documenting our successes, and yes, learning from our failures, we will demonstrate that innovation does not equate to recklessness. The energy in the room shifted as nods emerged from her team. They were rallying around her proposition. Questions fired from the boardroom, yet instead of the relentless skepticism she had anticipated, their inquiries reflected an eagerness to understand how they could embrace this shift without jeopardizing their foundation. She welcomed every challenge, her responses informed and grounded in the research she had tirelessly gathered. By the time she concluded, the air hummed with a sense of clarity, a collective shift from doubt to possibility. As she stepped away from the podium, the wave of adrenaline rushed through her, a mixture of vulnerability and triumph. The feedback she received was laden with the potential for collaboration. Investors who had once regarded her with skepticism now saw the tenacity of a leader unwilling to surrender her vision. Days passed, and to her elation, Sarah received the news she had worked so tirelessly for. The investors had approved her proposal. The pilot project would roll out, providing room for innovation while preserving their legacy. As the accolades began to circulate and her colleagues congratulated her, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over her. She had not just won their support, she had proven her worth and capacity to lead. Now firm in her role, Sarah shifted her vision beyond herself. She initiated mentor programs within the organization for aspiring leaders and encouraged open dialogues about innovation from all levels. By fostering a culture of support and collaboration, she was transforming not just Thompson Co., but her own understanding of leadership. Standing in her office, surrounded by the vibrant energy of her team, Sarah felt whole. She had discovered her voice amidst chaos and learned that vulnerability was not her vulnerability, it was her strength. Her journey had led her through trepidation, but she emerged with a solid confidence that echoed throughout the company. She was no longer merely the daughter. She was Sarah Thompson, a leader redefining what legacy and innovation meant in tandem. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she opened her laptop to a blank document. This time, it was not as an afterthought. It was an invitation to continue crafting the future. She typed the first words, a new project brewing in her mind, and leaned back, satisfied. She had conquered her doubts, proven her capability, and set the stage for future successes. It was time for a new legacy to unfold. If you felt inspired by Sarah's journey and want to witness more incredible transformations, now is the time to show your support.
Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more amazing individuals seeking to overcome their challenges. Comment below with your thoughts and theories about Sarah's journey. What resonated with you most? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to support stories of personal growth. Don't wait even one more second.